Well, ladies and gentlemen, today is the day before the Golden Globe Awards, and actually, it's the last time you'll probably see this location for a while here. So, let's go ahead and get started here. We're going to talk about some updates here for the top 8 categories at the Oscars. So that's picture, director, the 4 acting prizes, and the 2 screenplay awards. We'll go ahead and go down the list here. These are from most likely to least likely to win Best Picture. My choices. And remember that it is a sliding scale. We can have anywhere between 5 and 10 nominees. So, all right, I think I got it ready here. All right, let's go ahead and start here. Most likely to win Best Picture. I have 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri in first place, followed by Lady Bird, Get Out, The Shape of Water, The Post, Call Me By Your Name, Dunkirk, The Big Sick, Florida Project, and Darkest Hour to fill out the top 10 there. All right, so yeah, I've got this kind of figured out here. We're going to start with 3 Billboards, why I think this is the Best Picture winner right now. Well, so far, as we've seen here, it overperformed at both the Screen Actors Guild Awards and the Golden Globes, with 4 nominations at SAG and 6 nominations at the Globes. That was at SAG, the most nominated film, and at the Globes, it was tied with The Post for second place for most nominated film. And we're seeing from the SAG support that I think this film is going to score well in the Academy as well, because as you probably know, the acting branch of the Academy, that's the largest branch of the Academy Awards. And we've seen over the years, of course, that no film since Braveheart has won Best Picture without at least being nominated by the Screen Actors Guild Award for Outstanding Ensemble. 3 Billboards is one of those 5 nominees this year. Also, one thing that I think is going to shape the narrative this year for what the Academy wants to do is they want to choose an important movie every year, or they try to at least. We certainly saw that was the case in the last 2 years, where last year Moonlight felt way more important a movie than La La Land, which was kind of more of a love letter to old Hollywood musicals from the 50s and 60s. And then we had the year before that was Spotlight, which felt way more important than The Revenant, which was kind of a throwback to the old westerns, but just with a more updated style, a lot more graphic and a lot more violent, and also much higher budget and a lot of computer graphic and CGI images. So this year they want to try to find a film that's very important that feels like a film of its time, and I think 3 Billboards is certainly a film that is fits right into that mold. As we've seen, of course, this year, this is a year where women in Hollywood have had a real big, hell of a year with Wonder Woman and Beauty and the Beast and Star Wars: The Last Jedi. It's like all 3 of these films are some of the biggest of the year. They're all led by females, and it's also, of course, with everything coming out with all the allegations and stuff. We even had one recently with Paul Haggis. It's a year where women feel like they're finally kind of getting the edge over men in some respects, and of course, some of the men that are truly monsters are really, finally that's catching up with them. And the content of the film, 3 Billboards, it fits the narrative of going after criminals, rapists, and getting even. And I think that's something that a lot of women in Hollywood have done this year, and I think the Academy is going to really respond to that. Also, one thing we have to remember here is that you have to find a film. If it's going to win Best Picture, it's got to be a consensus choice. It's not just a film that everybody likes and nobody dislikes. It's got to be a film that is, if it's not your favorite film of the year, it's your number 2 or your number 3 favorite film of the year. We'll get into an explanation here in a minute of how the preferential ballot really helps this. But also the film, it's kind of like a film for me, 3 Billboards, that hits every quadrant. It appeals to the female crowd with the female perspective and the female lead. It's kind of like No Country for Old Men in its violence. It's also got Woody Harrelson in it. So it appeals to men with those violence and the revenge angle. And also, I think it's just going to do very well when it comes to the total nominations and where its nomination comes from. And as we've seen over the years, it's like the top. I mean, obviously, if you're going to win Best Picture, you got to be nominated for it. You also need nominations in at least one acting category, nominations for director, screenplay, film editing. Those are the ones you absolutely need, unless you're Birdman or I think you have to go all the way back to Titanic That was the last film to win Best Picture without a Screenplay prize nomination, at least. And as we've seen here over the past 5 years, every Best Picture winner has also picked up its respective screenplay prize as well. Spotlight did that, Moonlight did that, Birdman, 12 Years a Slave, Argo, all did that. The Artist was the last one that did not win original screenplay as well as winning Best Picture. And I think that Three Billboards is looking at a film editing nomination this year, even though I know it's some people are picking other films in that category. I think it gets in for film editing. Let's see here. Next up, we'll take a look at Lady Bird. This is my second pick. This is one I can see it in, in a few weeks' time if it wins PGA and it wins, a lot of a lot of Golden Globes. I mean, and a lot of if it wins a couple of Screen Actors Guild awards. I can see the support really mounting for Lady Bird, and that can overcome Three Billboards for sure. It also overperformed at SAG. It got 3 nominations, Best Cast, Lead Actress, and Supporting Actress. It did well at the Globes, even though Greta Gerwig did not get in for Director. She was in for Screenplay, and I think she'll win Screenplay tomorrow night. And I think the film will also win for Film Comedy, and Saoirse Ronan will also pick up Best Actress. So it has the acting support there, and again, the acting is the biggest branch. It is kind of more of the consensus vote. Nobody really hates this movie. I mean, up until recently, it had 100% score on Rotten Tomatoes. It's now dropped down, last I checked, to 99%. And again, I think it's that consensus vote where it's like, even if you're the men in the Academy who don't normally go for this movie, I doubt you're going to put it at number 8 or number 9, depending on how many Best Picture nominees we have when you're ranking all your movies. So I can see, you'll have people that go for Shape of Water as number 1, and Call Me by Your Name for number 1, or Florida Project, or The Post is your number 1 film of the year. But I think Lady Bird is going to end up being number 2 or number 3 on a lot of these lists. I think also Three Billboards will be fighting for that same chance there. So I can see a lot of ballots this year where something like Call Me by Your Name or Dunkirk is the number 1 pick. But number 2 is Three Billboards, number 3 is Lady Bird, or vice versa, where Lady Bird's number 2 and Three Billboards is number 3. And it just comes down to how many times they're going to redistribute the ballots there and keep counting up the votes there. Again, this is a woman-led film. It's a woman perspective film, especially more so than Three Billboards since it is written and directed by a female as well. And it is Greta Gerwig, of course, very famous being an actor and then also being a writer as well. She helped Noah Baumbach on a couple of his latest projects as well. The thing that's keeping me from putting it to number 1 right now, though, I don't think it gets one of those film editing nominations. I mean, it's still a possibility. It could still happen. And also, one thing, and, I might get some crap for this, but I'm looking at it as a possibility. I mean, I personally don't understand it either. But there are some men in the Academy this year, I'm sure, that are going to feel a little persecuted this year. They're like, any minute my number could be called, and all of a sudden I could get accused of all these horrendous stuff that all the other, well, not all the other, but, a lot of other men in the Academy and around Hollywood this year have been accused of. And so they might, feel a little persecuted in that way. They might say, well, I don't want to support a female-led film because all these females are, and that can be their perspective. I mean, obviously, everybody has a different opinion on everything. And like I said, I don't personally agree with this. I don't think, I'm not from that perspective at all. So, it's something it's a consideration, but I don't think it's going to be the main reason why I'm not supporting Lady Bird at this point. I think it's a ridiculous notion. And so you might have a couple of guys in there in the Academy, kind of the older people in the Academy who don't, like Dustin Hoffman or somebody like that. I don't know if he's even still in the Academy after everything come out against him. But, people like him who have come from the old world of Hollywood and who really don't take lightly all this stuff that's coming out. So they might say Lady Bird, ooh, I'm going to rank that down to number 6 or number 7, which definitely hurts its Best Picture chances. And again, I think the film editing thing is the main thing, though. Not getting a film editing nomination. Again, Birdman was the last one to do it. But you have to go before Birdman to a film that won Best Picture without film editing. You have to go all the way back to 1980 with Ordinary People. That was the last one to do it. Okay, and I do have a Get Out in third place here. These are the 3 that got the SAG nomination for Outstanding Cast, have really scored about everywhere they could. They all got PGA nominations. They all did well at the Globes. and they got other support from SAG, including Daniel Kaluuya getting in for Best Actor here for Get Out. I'm trying to think. They all did well at Critics' Choice. None of them have really disappointed yet in any regard. Well, some people would say, with the exception of both Jordan Peele and Greta Gerwig not getting in for director for the Globes, and Jordan Peele not getting in for screenplay at the Globes. That's really the only exception here where they've maybe underperformed, but everywhere else they've done very well. The thing with Get Out, it also overperformed at SAG. I did not think it was going to get one of those film ensemble nominations, but what do you know? It did. It did okay at the Globes. It got film comedy and actor comedy nominations, and it's a very diverse film, and we saw that there was, in the last couple of years, they've had a big increase in minority voting in the Academy, where they've brought in a lot of African American voters, a lot of women voters. Other non-white voters have come in here in the past couple of years, and I think that's again a big reason why Moonlight won last year. Was I think their vote was very very strong, and I think it really affected some of the other voters maybe in putting Moonlight higher on their ballot than they ordinarily would have. I don't know if it's not it could be a consensus film too, kind of like Lady Bird, where just that the film itself is so great that some people might, put it at number 2, number 3, or even number 4. And again, a 99% Rotten Tomatoes score, so it's a big critical darling. I do have it getting in for film editing, but I don't have Jordan Peele getting in right now for Best Director. I think it's a possibility. I think he has to get a DGA nomination. That's when I'll bet on him. I don't know if he's going to get in at BAFTA either. And yeah, so we'll have to see. But yeah, I think that's one. I mean, obviously, Argo did it without a Best Director nomination, but that was the first time in close to 25 years that had happened. So you have to go back to Driving Miss Daisy before that happened again. So, we'll see here. I mean, if we have a thing like Lady Bird wins Best Picture without film editing, that would have been only a 3-year gap. And Get Out, no director nomination, but still gets Best Picture. That would be a 5-year gap between when that last happened. And most of the time when you have, weird situations like that, I think that's, the stretch goes longer than 3 years, 5 years. It's more normally a lot longer than those. Anyway, so those are the reasons why I'm putting those 3 up front here. We'll get into the rest of the films here in a minute, but there is one thing I want to address here that is kind of going around here for the voters and everybody who thinks Shape of Water is still going to win Best Picture, or The Post, or that Dunkirk can still win Best Picture, or that Call Me By Your Name is a favorite to win Best Picture, or even something like The Florida Project. The thing is, none of those films received a Screen Actors Guild nomination for Outstanding Cast. And the one thing everybody, including me especially, really, that, just shot us in the foot last year, we all overlooked it, we all really were wrong, dead wrong about it, was what was the favorite to win Best Picture last year was La La Land. And what did La La Land lack? It was a Screen Actors Guild nominee for Outstanding Cast. Now, the reason why I think SAG is a big determiner here at the Oscars, why it has been for the past 21 years, is that, as I've mentioned before, the acting branch of the Academy is the biggest in the Academy. It's bigger than the director's branch, bigger than the writer's branch, bigger than all of the technical branches. And as I said, since Braveheart, no non-SAG ensemble nominee has won Best Picture. Also, we see in the other categories that Best Actor at SAG and Oscar have lined up consistently until last year with Denzel. I think it was more than 10 years. I think he had to go back to, I forget who it was. I think it was Daniel Day-Lewis won SAG for Gangs of New York, and then Adrian Brody won at the Oscars, and since then they had it right all the time. And roughly 50% of the time, your SAG Ensemble winner also goes on to win Best Picture. So if that's the case this year, and if it lines up that way mathematically, that automatically eliminates Shape of Water, The Post, Florida Project, Call Me By Your Name. Those, are not going to line up mathematically if we're going by that formula. Now, of course, last year Hidden Figures was incorrect. Spotlight was correct the year before that. Birdman was correct the year before that. American Hustle was wrong before that. Argo got it right. The Help got it wrong. It's like, so there is that pattern that goes on and off for SAG. But and then when we look at the stats too, as far as your SAG nominees in the individual categories too, for supporting actress, lead actor, lead actress, close to 75% of your SAG nominees on average go on to an Oscar nomination. And that, obviously that doesn't guarantee that they're going to line up 5 for 5 every time, but it's a good bet there. And we've seen a couple of films recently, like Straight Outta Compton and The Butler. There's a couple other ones like Beast of No Nation. They get SAG nominations for Outstanding Cast, but then they don't get a Best Picture nomination. So that happens too. I think that'll probably be the case this year with Mudbound. Yeah, I think that's really the only one. I think the other. Wait, who was the other one? I keep forgetting who the 5 nominees were. Oh, The Big Sick. Yeah, The Big Sick. It's a possibility to get in for Best Picture, but I have it. Yeah, I have it in, but it's like way down on the list, and it depends on how many films they're going to pick in the first round voting. Because remember, you have to get 5% of the popular vote to get a Best Picture nomination. So, it just depends on how many slots we have. So, something like I think for sure we're going to get 7 this year. For sure Dunkirk, for sure Call Me By Your Name, The Post, Shape of Water, Get Out, Lady Bird, and 3 Billboards. I think those are absolutely safe. I think they're all going to get the 5% popular vote for #1 picks in the first round voting. The Big Sick I can see struggling, though it does have a PGA nomination. It is a SAG Ensemble nominee. Got in for the, I think it was AFI list and a few Critics' Choice nominations. But it did miss big time at the Globes. I don't know how it's going to do at BAFTA. Probably not extremely well. I doubt it gets into DGA. The Florida Project is another one that it's got passion behind it and a lot of passionate voters, but is it enough to get that 5%? Darkest Hour is my 10th place pick. Again, I don't know if that one's going to have the 5%. And yeah, so let's keep going here. Yeah, we're on that same subject. So yeah, we have like Shape of Water, Call Me By Your Name, The Post, Florida Project. They have detractors. There's people that don't like the movie or don't like it as much as some of the other movies. Dunkirk is somewhat divisive this year, with some members in the Academy already saying they don't really like it. Support is really falling for Darkest Hour, which didn't get a PGA nomination and didn't get a lot of love from the Golden Globes or SAG. Support is very sporadic for Big Sick, I, Tonya, The Disaster Artist, All the Money in the World, Phantom Thread. These have all missed some key spots, or again, they might lack the 5% #1 votes in the first round voting to get a Best Picture nomination. Yeah, again, I still think, yeah, like I said, Shape of Water, Call Me By Your Name, Post, and Dunkirk are still for sure going to get nominations for Best Picture, but the rest of them, it's kind of shaky if they're going to get that 5% of the popular vote. Another one we haven't really mentioned yet too much is Mudbound. Of course, it's from Netflix, and as we've seen before, Netflix, they don't have a problem nominating it in the documentary categories and stuff like that, but it's never been nominated in a big top 8 category of screenplay, acting, directing, or best film. And there is a Netflix bias, and we've heard from many voters in the Academy over the years that Netflix has been trying to get certain films in and get them nominated for some of these top awards, and some of the members of the Academy don't go for it. They just don't care. They don't have Netflix subscriptions. They think Netflix should be all TV. And speaking of which, there are a couple of guilds I've heard through Twitter and a couple other sources. Some guilds are putting Mudbound in the TV categories for I don't know the specific awards, but that really, I think, for some of the Academy voters, if they hear about it or if they are in the guild as well as being in the Academy, definitely they're gonna pay no attention to it. So I think that's why somebody like Mary J. Blige, or for adapted screenplay, that's why I'm not betting on him for Mudbound. And as we saw, it was a couple of years ago, Idris Elba was all over the place for Beast of No Nation, and yeah, for me personally, I thought it was one of the best performances of the year, and definitely the best in that supporting category. But, and despite getting into Golden Globes, and he got into SAG, he won SAG eventually, and getting into BAFTA, probably part of it was also because of his being from the UK, he didn't get into the Oscars. So there's precedent in the past for a film like Mudbound, or nomination or acting and performances like Mary J. Blige to get nominated in the past, and for some of the precursors, but then miss at the Oscars. Another thing too, and this kind of goes back to that female perspective and everything, and voting for something important. The Academy this year, they want to look good, and they really don't want the blog writers and all the editorials coming out the day after the Oscars saying Oscars go really safe again with Dunkirk Best Picture or with The Post Best Picture. And leaving something like Lady Bird or Three Billboards and I, Tonya, some of these other female perspective movies out in the cold, that can really make them look bad. And I think the same thing, it happened a couple of years ago when the Lady Gaga song lost Best Original Song to Spectre. And, well, first of all, for me personally, I thought the song that Lady Gaga did was a much better song. Diane Warren was one of the contributors on the song, so she would have finally gotten an Oscar. Lady Gaga had just come off a Golden Globe win for her American Horror Story performance, and the year before that, she had given a tremendous performance just singing a medley from Sound of Music, and that really turned her career around from being just the pop singer to a really respected artist, and it was like an overnight turn. And then they don't give her Best Song. They don't give Diane Warren an Oscar. Instead, they give it to Sam Smith for a pretty forgettable Bond song. And then he goes on stage and, kind of makes some very inaccurate claims. And at the end of the day, the Academy just looked totally foolish. I mean, he even had Vice President Joe Biden introduce Lady Gaga before she performed the song on Oscar night. So the Academy looked really bad after that. And I think there's going to be some perspective out there that if Three Billboards or Lady Bird or one of these other films doesn't win Best Picture, where they're going to go out on their blog, some of these, kind of yuppity liberals out there. I'm not saying I'm one of those. I'm not saying they're totally bad people, but I'm just saying that it's going to be out there, and it's going to be, the Academy goes with a safe choice and misses the boat again or something, even though Moonlight won last year and Spotlight won the year before that. So, and we also, in the effect of looking good, they might want to reward All the Money in the World more than any of the other precursors have this year. Obviously, it did well at the Globes. It got director, it got supporting actor and lead actress, at the Globes there. And, the politics of it might just play in, and All the Money in the World suddenly does better at the Oscars than anywhere else. I mean, we're talking maybe nominations for picture, director, supporting actor, maybe lead actress, maybe for adapted screenplay, film editing. Those are all possibilities, maybe just for the politics of replacing Kevin Spacey and getting it right and looking good in that perspective. Maybe the Academy really goes for it because of the headlines. And Ridley Scott and company, they're doing all the interviews, all the press, everything they can to really look good and to really look like this is a very important movie, even though it's kind of a throwaway thriller movie that has a couple of good performances in it. But at the same time, though, we do have to say, though, All the Money in the World did not get a PGA nomination. It did not qualify in time for SAG, so it didn't get any nominations there. I'm not sure what its chances are at BAFTA. It could maybe get a couple nominations there. I don't know if Ridley Scott gets in for DGA. It's a possibility, but I'm not betting on it right now. So, there's not a lot of support for that motion right now, but I think if the Academy really wants to look good and really wants to praise those who are really speaking out and going out against all these real monsters out there who have done terrible things, I think they could give All the Money in the World a lot of support. One more thing here before we get to my a kind of explanation, because I know there's some of you out there who don't know what the preferential ballot is, and you're like, what's this thing you're talking about, consensus vote and stuff? I'll get to that in a minute here. But one more thing, might get a little heated here, might get some shit from people for this, but hey, Wonder Woman just got nominated for the PGA, and Logan just got a WGA nomination for adapted screenplay. Yeah, so what? That doesn't mean they're going to get a Best Picture nomination. Doesn't mean they're going to get a screenplay nomination. Not necessarily. Don't expect anything big from the Oscars from these guys, because Logan, for me personally, I think it's an overrated movie. I mean, I didn't think it was the best film of the year by any regard. I don't think any of the performances really stood out, except for maybe Patrick Stewart, but he's only gotten a Critics' Choice nomination. That's about it. And really, I think the WGA, there were a couple films in the adapted screenplay category this year that are looking like they're very solid bets for the Oscars, but they weren't eligible at WGA, so it's kind of like the pool gets shrunk down even more for WGA. And with PGA, they did have to go to 11 nominations. I don't know for sure because you had like Molly's Game and I, Tonya in there as well. They're not really looking like the most solid choices for Best Picture nominees. And then you got Wonder Woman getting in there. They did go to 11. The Oscars won't do that. They'll cut it down to 10. So I doubt. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we'll ever see a day when there's 11 Best Picture nominees. So I think that if that's a possibility of what happened to Wonder Woman, it became a tie for 10th place at the PGA. That's why they expanded it to 11 for that one. So that's a possibility there. I'm not saying that's what happened, but I'm saying it's a possibility, and it might be an explanation for why that's on the list. But there is a superhero academy or a superhero bias in the academy, and if The Dark Knight couldn't do it, I don't see why Wonder Woman or Logan should. So yeah, that's just if you're somebody. I mean, and nobody. I'm not trying to make you look bad if you like those movies and if you want them nominated for some of these top categories. Obviously, I don't want to come off that way. But I'm just saying, don't get your hopes up too high because I don't think we've got so many other great films this year that are not superhero related that are getting all these big nominations as well. So I'm just saying, don't get your hopes too high. Okay, so now we're going to go into my example of how the preferential ballot works here. Now, I'm not a complete expert on this, so I just try to do a very basic example of how the voting goes for determining Best Picture. This is after we have all of our nominations out and after everything's done, and now we get into the final voting to award Best Picture. And so in this case, what I did was I said, okay, in this example here, we're picking all films from this year, but let's say that the Oscars only have 5 Best Picture nominees this year. So the 5 nominees are The Florida Project, Get Out, 3 Billboards, Lady Bird, and The Shape of Water. So let's say, that you're a voter in the Academy, and you like The Florida Project. That's your number 1, and you like Get Out and 3 Billboards. And you like those quite a bit. So let's say, you go with Get Out for number 2, and 3 Billboards number 3, Lady Bird and The Shape of Water is your number 5. And let's say there's 100 votes in the Academy this year. There's only 100 people voting for this. And so they go through, they collect all the ballots, and you've got all these ballots here, and they go, okay, what was the number 1 pick for all these ballots? So they look at them all. Number 1 on 3 of the ballots was The Florida Project. Number 1 on 20 of the ballots was Get Out. Number 1 on 25 of the ballots was 3 Billboards. Number 1 on 18 of the ballots was Lady Bird, and number 1 on 34 of the ballots was The Shape of Water. Okay, so we've got a few films that are really in contention there, and one, The Florida Project, which only got 3 votes. So that one's done. It can't win Best Picture. So what they do with the preferential ballot is they cross out The Florida Project, and they bump up your number 2 vote, and now that becomes your number 1. And so that gets added to the pile of other ballots that have your number 2 film at number 1. So your number 2 film in this case was Get Out. So now Get Out gets an extra ballot. And the other 2 that picked The Florida Project, their number 2 was Lady Bird. So now it's 18 it's 20 for Lady Bird. Then you've got 21 for Get Out. 3 Billboards has 25. Shape of Water has 34. So now, since Lady Bird only has 20 ballots that have number 1, we've got to get rid of those, and we have to cross out the number 1 for those and move down to what's number 2. So now we do that again, and let's see here. Let's say that we had 7 of those go to The Florida Project. That was their number 2. 4 of them had Get Out. 4 of them had 3 Billboards. 3 of them had The Shape of Water. And then there were 2 that left the rest of their ballot empty, which some voters do. And so what happens is, since your number 1 was eliminated and you have no other votes in there, your ballot gets tossed out. So now there's 98 ballots remaining. So with that, and then since the Florida Project has already been eliminated, that means that they go down to the number 3 on those ballots, and those now become the number 1. So before that, the total was 25 for Get Out, 29 for 3 Billboards, 37 for The Shape of Water, and now we have to add 7 more votes between those 3 movies from those ballots that had Florida Project number 2. So it keeps going like this. It keeps going. It keeps going. The numbers keep going until we get to 50% plus one, or in this case, it would be just 51% since it's 100 votes. But since two of them were eliminated, now it becomes I forget what the number is. It's like 49 or something becomes 50%. So it keeps going. It keeps going. Eventually, Shape of Water gets 51 votes, which is 52%. And that is declared Best Picture. So you can keep going and keep eliminating, because then, say, Get Out has the least number of votes. So you cross those off and redistribute those again, and it keeps going, it keeps going, it keeps going until you get that 50% plus one. And it gets really complicated, of course, when you've got up to 9 or 10 films that you have to go through, and some of those will leave the rest of the rest of the blanks, the rest of the spaces blank, if I can talk. And all of a sudden those ballots are tossed out and we have to go to something else, and it's, yeah. So it can get really complicated, and it's a big thing that PricewaterhouseCoopers do every year to determine the Best Picture winner, and they have to, of course, after they do it, they have to double check everything again. They have to go through everything again, and it's a really complicated thing. So yeah, so obviously we give them crap for getting the envelopes mixed up last year, but it's like when they actually do the tabulating and the voting and all that stuff and counting up all the ballots, it's a lot of work, a lot of work. So yeah, all right. So that's all I have to say about Best Picture. We'll move on now to the other 7 categories we're going to talk about, which are the 4 acting categories, the 2 screenplay, and director. Now, starting with director here, my 5 are Guillermo del Toro for The Shape of Water, Christopher Nolan for Dunkirk, Martin McDonagh for 3 Billboards, Greta Gerwig for Lady Bird, and Steven Spielberg for The Post. Again, I don't have Jordan Peele getting in there. I don't have Sean Baker. I don't have Ridley Scott. I don't have Luca Guadagnino. Those are a few other possibilities. But right now, I think Guillermo has it. He kind of comes down from the line of like Alfonso Cuarón and Iñárritu, Alejandro Iñárritu, who won 2 years back-to-back. And as we saw last year, Damien Chazelle was the first Caucasian director to win since going back to Catherine Bigelow in 2009. So they have really liked either British directors or Asian directors in the case of Ang Lee and Mihail Hazanavicius, or whatever his name is, who directed The Artist, was European. So they really like foreign directors. So that's why I think they're going to go with either Guillermo, Christopher Nolan, and then Martin McDonagh is also a foreigner there. He's from the UK. So, yeah, but between the 3 of them, I think Guillermo del Toro has the... they often, for Best Direct, they want to do the directorial achievement of the year, you know, the film that looks the most impressive, something like Gravity, or Life of Pi, or Birdman, or The Revenant, you know, or even last year with La La Land, which looked much more extravagant, much more expensive than Moonlight did. Even though Moonlight probably had some of the better performances and some of the more tighter story and stuff. Sometimes that helps determine your best director. Like, I think that happened. We can go clear back to Terms of Endearment. I think that's why he won. James Brooks won for that. And like American Beauty had that. It wasn't a big technical achievement that year. It was kind of more just the performances and the script and handling all that. So they do like to award that every once in a while, which is why I think somebody like Greta could win, but it doesn't necessarily fit the mold. And again, if they do want to go all out with the female perspective, I think that also helps Greta Gerwig's case. But I think they would rather go, and they more commonly go for the big directorial achievement. That's what they've done more recently, and they've more consistently awarded that. So that's why I think it comes down to either Guillermo del Toro or Christopher Nolan. And Christopher Nolan does have the overdue factor, and I can easily see him win DGA, win the Globe this Sunday, and win Critics' Choice, and just get on a train and just keep going and just win the Oscar as well. It's a possibility for sure. And I think it determines, especially if we get a mix here, and let's say Del Toro wins the Globe, and then Christopher Nolan wins Critics' Choice, and then it comes down to whoever wins DGA. I think that's when we have to pick whoever wins that to win the Oscar too. It's very, very, very rare that DGA gets either Best Director or Best Picture wrong. I think you have to go back to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, where they awarded Ang Lee that year at the DGA, and then I think I've got my years right here. It was Soderbergh won Director and Gladiator won Best Picture. So Crouching Tiger didn't get either of those. So that's the last time DGA has gotten either Best Director or Best Picture wrong. So Yeah, right now I'm sticking with Guillermo del Toro. I think the Latin factor, and also just being the more big achievement of the year. It's also a more likely pick for Best Picture than Dunkirk is. So I think that's why they'll go with Shape of Water. Again, if somebody like Martin McDonagh just gets on a roll and starts winning DGA and wins the Globe this Sunday, which I don't think will happen, but it's a possibility. The same with Greta Gerwig. If they just get on a roll and keep winning everything, I think those are a couple other possibilities to throw out there. But this is certainly not as competitive as clear back in 2015, where it was like up to 3 directors could win, and it was like between George Miller and Iñárritu and Adam McKay, and it was McCarthy. Todd McCarthy could win for or Todd McCarthy, or no, it was Tom McCarthy. Sorry. Todd McCarthy's the critic. Okay, so let's move on here to lead actor. And this has become a real tight race between the 2 top contenders for me, which are Gary Oldman for Darkest Hour and Timothée Chalamet for Call Me By Your Name. My other 3 nominees are Daniel Day-Lewis for Phantom Thread, James Franco for The Disaster Artist, and Daniel Kaluuya for Get Out. I think of those 5, the top 4 are pretty safe. There is still a possibility, I think, for Tom Hanks to break in and get one of those spots away from Daniel Kaluuya. Denzel Washington, he's been doing well recently. I doubt he gets a BAFTA nomination. He's never gotten nominated to BAFTA, so I don't think this is the year to do it for Roman J. Israel. And otherwise, he did get a SAG nomination and he did get a Globe nomination, but I don't see him winning either of those. So I think Daniel Kaluuya, he's also in Get Out, which is, of course, a much, much more likely contender for Best Picture than Roman J. Israel. And the way this works out, it could come down, like, let's say, Call Me By Your Name, for whatever reason, misses out for Best Picture. Daniel Kaluuya all of a sudden could be the only actor in this category who gets nominated in a film that's up for Best Picture. It's a possibility, because I don't know if Darkest Hour can do it. I think Phantom Thread and Disaster Artist are off the radar a little bit for Best Picture. So, I mean, it's a possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I think Call Me By Your Name has the support it needs. But it's an oddball possibility. So, yeah. Anyways, so, yeah, I think the thing is, it's either going to be the young ingenue being awarded, which traditionally happens in Best Actress. It very rarely happens in Best Actor, even more rare for just the guy to get it, because I think you have to go back to Timothy Hutton was the last really young performer to win supporting actor or lead actor, because he was supporting that year for Ordinary People. And then we've seen like Tatum O'Neal won for Paper Moon, and Anna Paquin won. So sometimes they do go for the child performances, but that's traditionally more of the girls than it is for the guys. So, and Timothée Chalamet, he's only 22 years old, so he'd be the youngest Best Actor winner, I believe. He'd be younger than Adrian Brody, I think. Well, yeah, Adrian Brody was pretty young. Yeah, we can say he was the most recent one. And again, that was in a film that was, ended up winning Best Director and was really kind of a surprise. All of a sudden, could come back from behind and win Best Picture kind of thing. But obviously, that didn't happen. So I don't know if Call Me by Your Name can be quite in that class. But as far as traditional, as far as Oscar history, but it is certainly a performance that's worth awarding. I haven't seen Darkest Hour yet, but Timothée did leave a big impression with Call Me by Your Name. I think he's going to be one of the biggest stars in the next 5 years. I think he can definitely get one of those superhero movies, and all of a sudden he's a big time star. And he'll also, I think, have obviously he was a good supporting role in Lady Bird too. So he's got the critics on his back. And I think if he gets some of these more bigger projects in the future, I think he'll become a very world renowned name. Now the thing, and what I'm going with Gary Oldman here is, first of all, he was the front runner clear back in in September, even some people say early August, when Darkest Hour was getting completed and started screening at all the festivals. He's got the factor of being a Brit. They really like Brits for Best Actor. We saw that with Daniel Day-Lewis. Who else? God, I'm forgetting who else won here recently, but Eddie Redmayne won. Gosh, I don't know. My memory is failing me right now. What's his name? Jean Dujardin won. Yeah, he was a European actor, so I guess you can count European actors usually get a better chance here. And then plus, it's Gary Oldman. He's only been nominated once before, and it felt like that was way overdue. So now an Oscar win feels like it's overdue. He's got the makeup, prosthetics. It's a very transformative performance. He plays a real person, a very historical figure. I think all those factors are way too much for Timothée, who plays a fictional character. He's very young, and despite the fact that he does give a tremendous performance in the film, and again, his film is more likely to get in for Best Picture than it is for Darkest Hour. It's going to come down to the wire here for those two, but I think it is at this stage at least. I'm saying Gary Oldman. All right, moving over to the lead ladies, I have Frances McDormand out front for Three Billboards, Saoirse Ronan in second place for Lady Bird, Sally Hawkins for The Shape of Water, Meryl Streep for The Post in fourth place, and Margot Robbie in fifth place for I, Tonya. These five, I think, are the safest bets here, but I think we have to look out for Judi Dench is the only other competitor I think who can get in here. But then again, maybe Jessica Chastain, because Molly's Game, it's been doing well recently. It's so far, it's doing okay at the box office. Critics really like it. Aaron Sorkin is a very likely nominee for Best Adapted Screenplay. It just got a PGA nomination, so it does have some support from the Producers Guild. So it's a possibility she gets in, but she did miss at SAG. She got in at Critics' Choice, right? I think she did. But yeah, SAG is a big thing to miss, and the Globes race for drama was, she was a pretty likely contender there. Anyway, so, yeah, for me, this is probably the most competitive category of any of the acting categories this year, as far as the number of competitors, because I think really everybody that I have down here except Margot Robbie is up to win. I mean, Meryl Streep, if she does win, this would be her fourth win. That puts her on a tie with Katharine Hepburn for the most Oscars ever bestowed to an actress. So, yeah. I don't know, though. Meryl just won 6 years ago, but then again, if you look at it, Hepburn won 2 of her Oscars back-to-back. That was number 2 and number 3 wins, and then her fourth win came a couple decades later. Sally Hawkins, I have in third place. Shape of Water. She was nominated before for Blue Jasmine. This is her second time up. And she did win the Globe for Happy Go Lucky a few years ago. So that's, she's on their radar. Shape of Water, again, is one that I have it winning Best Director. So it'll be a film that they want to give other categories to. I think original score probably, and production design probably goes for Shape of Water too. But it's very physical performance in the way of it's not a speaking role. It's all about, because she's mute in the film, so she has to do the sign language, and she has to be very emotive in just her looks and her expressions and the way she signs and the way her eyes move and the expression she makes when she's signing her sentences. And it's a phenomenal performance, probably the one of the best performances of the year for sure. So it's a possibility she wins. She was a front runner clear back, for me at least. I put her out front early on, or pretty early on. So, yeah, she's got a shot for sure. And then you have Saoirse Ronan. Now, this is more of the mold of what we've seen recently for Best Actress winners, because last year with Emma Stone, who was in her 20s, she won. Brie Larson, Jennifer Lawrence, all really ingenues. You can go back even to Grace Kelly winning for Country Girl over the more legendary performance of Judy Garland in Star is Born, and they go with the ingenues. They go with the hot new car, or the hot new doll, or whatever you want to, whatever phrase you want to put in there. So Saoirse I have in second place, yeah, and again, Lady Bird, it's a contender for Best Picture for sure, and it'll also again be a possible contender in directing and original screenplay. So it's a film that they will definitely want to award. And I think it's also another really great performance. But I do have Frances McDormand out front for Three Billboards because I think she is likely to win the Globe. I could see her winning SAG. I can see her, BAFTA would probably either go for Sally or Saoirse. But she could win Critics' Choice, too. So she could win everything except BAFTA and also win the Oscar, too. And then we do see sometimes that Best Picture wants to wind up with an acting award too. So for me, I have Three Billboards winning Best Picture, and we saw Moonlight had picture and one of the acting awards. We saw that 12 Years a Slave did that with supporting actress. The Artist with lead actor. The King's Speech with lead actor. No Country for Old Men had supporting actors. So yeah, they do like to get an acting award up there with your Best Picture winner. And so that's why I think I'm going with Frances right now. Plus, she gives a very dynamic performance, a very angry performance, a very defiant performance, and such a gritty performance that that it's something I think that the Academy really, really likes. And then Frances, she did win before for Fargo, of course. That was 20 plus years ago. But Frances McDormand is the caliber kind of actress I can see historically going down with 2 Oscars, you know, kind of like, maybe not like a few other ones, but gosh, I can't even think of an example right now. Who has 2 Oscars who's a girl? I don't know, no examples are coming to mind, but there's been several that have won twice. So, yeah, I can see Frances joining that that kind of crowd there. All right, but yeah, that one, it's going to come down to the wire between those 3. And turns out, actually, I can see a scenario also where SAG, because SAG is kind of like the Globes, they're really stingy about giving one particular movie multiple awards. And I have 3 Billboards winning SAG at the moment, and I have Frances McDormand winning Best Actress. But since Frances will already win a SAG for being in the cast of 3 Billboards, I can see a possibility where they say, okay, well, since Frances is already going to get her SAG here, let's give it to either Sally or Saoirse Ronan. So they might go, because Shape of Water is not up for Outstanding Cast, so the only way to award Sally would give her Best Actress. At the same time, if they give 3 Billboards Outstanding Cast, and let's say Laurie Metcalf wins Supporting Actress for SAG, then Saoirse Ronan becomes the only way to win for Lady Bird. So it's like those, yeah, it could come down to a lot of different possibilities there. Okay. If you saw my Globes prediction video, I said supporting actor was a pretty crowded field there for that one. But looking at the Oscars, though, I think right now, unless we see kind of like what I was talking about before, if you get on a roll and start winning everything, I think Willem Dafoe is just the default choice here right now. Again, we kind of see like a few years ago when Julianne Moore won for Still Alice. That was the only nomination for the film, and it was like, it didn't matter that it didn't have any other support. They just kept going with it. I can see that's the scenario this year for the Florida Project. Now, at the same time, Florida Project right now has a lot better Best Picture odds than Still Alice did. But at the same time, it's one of those performances where it's like, Willem Dafoe has been so good for so many years. It's like, we finally got to give him an Oscar for this. So I think that's a way. Plus, it's a tremendous performance, too, in Florida Project. So that's definitely something there. I have Armie Hammer in second place for Call Me By Your Name, kind of being the romantic lead in the film. Sometimes they go for that for supporting actor. Even you can go back to like Jim Broadbent was a really oddball example, and he kind of overcame Ian McKellen and a couple other much more likely contenders that year for supporting actor. So that's kind of the mold I fit him into. Sam Rockwell I have getting in for 3 Billboards in third place. He's a very respected actor. It's going to be his first nomination. It'll also be the first nomination for Armie Hammer, and I believe it's Willem Dafoe's 3rd nomination. But with Sam Rockwell, though, even though he is, he's kind of like that cool actor who everybody loves, everybody's worked with, there is a little bit of controversy around his character in the movie and how he's really a racist bigot up until the 3rd act. And so they might, again, looking good at the Academy, they might not look good if they award a performance that's a bigot for over half the movie. Even though he turns out to be one of the more heroic characters of the film by the 3rd act, and what he does in the 3rd act is pretty great. I don't know, those first 2 acts might take him down. Richard Jenkins I have in 4th place for The Shape of Water. It's a very kind of emotional performance, and emotional I mean, like, he's very expressive and his emotions kind of guide his character. And I think that's something the Academy really likes. And plus, it's Shape of Water. I think they'll give it a lot of stuff. And in 5th place, I have Christopher Plummer getting in for All the Money in the World. Now, he's one I can see winning if he wins the Globe, and then he won't win SAG because he's not nominated. But if he gets in at BAFTA, and he wins BAFTA, and say Critics' Choice and SAG go to 2 different actors, let's say Willem Dafoe wins one of them, but then Rockwell wins SAG, or Richard Jenkins wins SAG, or they go really oddball choice and pick Woody Harrelson or Steve Carell. It's like if they do that, then I think Christopher Plummer would then have more wins than anybody else in the big competitive award shows there. So I think that's a way he can win the Oscar. Plus, and again, the politics play into it there, and he might win an Oscar for like a week's work replacing Kevin Spacey. But it is, that's something you gotta, acknowledge there. Now, as far as other possible nominees here, Michael Stuhlbarg I had in for a while, but after having seen the film and plus he didn't get in at SAG, he didn't get a Globe nomination. The thing is with his character is he's very stagnant throughout the first 100 minutes or so of Call Me By Your Name. And it's not until we get to that last 10, 15 minutes or so that he finally gets that big emotional scene, that big scene where he gets the Oscar nomination. And that's the thing, too. Call Me By Your Name, it is kind of, there's some people who don't like it. It has detractors out there. And I think in the same way that Moonlight had detractors, too. And it might be more than just the gay angle in it, though. The thing is, it's kind of a slow movie, and especially for me, that first act is, once you get through that, then you get to the more interesting stuff, and that's when it really picks up, is when we get into the second act. So I can see there's a lot of voters, I'm sure, that'll put in the movie, and they'll say, oh, this is so slow, and then they'll take the movie out, and they won't finish it before they get to Michael Stuhlbarg's best scenes. So I think that's why he doesn't get nominated. And plus, Armie Hammer, he's more of a, they like to go with the more well-known actors, too. But one thing, though, that Stuhlbarg does have that Armie Hammer doesn't, and none of these other actors have, he's also in The Post, and he's also in The Shape of Water. So he has been everywhere this year. Well, if you look at it, last year he was in Miss Sloane, and he was in, what was the other one he was in last year? Arrival. And the year before that, he was in Trumbo and a couple other ones. So he's an actor who normally gets, multiple films out at the same time that are both, or all of them are kind of up for some of the top awards. So that's why I think that argument can kind of be put to rest for at least a minute there. And then, see, the last one I have here, Woody Harrelson he did get a SAG nomination, and his role in Three Billboards, it is kind of, his good scenes are really restricted to the first act. And then after that, he's kind of sporadic throughout the rest of the movie. But the thing with him is I kind of mentioned this earlier, but he's the more, because both he and Sam Rockwell are cops in the movie Three Billboards. Woody is the cop that has more of a heart than Sam Rockwell does, at least for the first two acts again. But, and his character, it's kind of like reminiscent of Michael Shannon's performance in Nocturnal Animals from last year, where his co-star, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, kept getting nominated everywhere for being the villain of the movie, but yet the more heroic performance and the more ethical performance, if you will, with Michael Shannon got in. Even though, yeah, he was a more recognizable name, and I don't know, they're pretty even. I think Sam Rockwell and Woody Harrelson, they're both really well-respected character actors, but Woody's probably the bigger name between the two of them, though. So I think that's why he got in at SAG too, is he's also a TV actor for many years. So, and they like TV actors at SAG. So, and again, there's a possibility Sam Rockwell at the last minute gets swapped out for Woody Harrelson, because Woody has more of the heroic role for most of the movie, but I think Sam Rockwell's too far out ahead for that to happen. Okay, moving over to supporting actress. In first place, I have Laurie Metcalf for Lady Bird, kind of the safe pick. Number 2, I have Allison Janney for I, Tonya. Third place, Holly Hunter for The Big Sick. Octavia Spencer in fourth place for Shape of Water, and Hong Chow in fifth place for Downsizing. Yeah, this category, it's kind of weird this year, because we have, all these contenders, plus you've got Mary J. Blige, and you've got a few other ones in there, like Tiffany Haddish, who got a few notices early on. But Tiffany has not made it in anywhere else, other than New York Film Critics Prizes and a couple other Critics Prizes here and there. Hasn't gotten anything, except for, I think she got Critics' Choice, that's right. She got one of the supporting actress nominations there. Otherwise, she's been empty. She's come out empty everywhere else. And the thing is with me, again, I'm thinking with the Mudbound thing, the Netflix factor and the bias takes Mary J. Blige out. So that leaves the other 5 there. I'm thinking this is going to come close to Allison Janney. And both of them, I think, are the ones that are going to really fight this one out. Because I think Holly Hunter, there's a possibility Big Sick doesn't get in for Best Picture. I don't think Octavia's role in Shape of Water is substantial enough. It's a good performance and everything. I just think she gets more to do in this film than she did last year in Hidden Figures. She got nominated for that. And then Hong Chow and Downsizing, I in particular enjoyed the performance. I know there are some people that think it's a racist performance, but hey, if you're saying that's a racist performance, then I guess you have to say that every performance in Fargo, the movie, is racist, and you have to say the same thing with a lot of those other ones, just because of the accent and everything. And then also with Hong Chow, she also does not come in until the second half of the movie. She is pretty substantial there, of course, and she gets a couple crying scenes and stuff. So yeah, So it's a substantial role in everything. But again, if you don't like downsizing, which a lot of critics don't, I in particular really enjoyed it. But it's another one where it's like you watch it and then you're like, this doesn't interest me. So you take it out of the you take the screener out before you get to Hong Chau's scenes in the movie. So that's a possibility. That's a possibility. If that does happen, then I think it's Mary J. Blige who gets in. But again, I'm not predicting her. Now the thing is with me, Allison Janney is the firebrand performance in I, Tonya. It's she dominates the screen. You can't take her eyes off her. She's the mother from hell, and she is absolutely kind of like Jennifer Lawrence in American Hustle. It's like it's a supporting performance, but whenever she's off screen, you're kind of like, oh, when is Allison Janney getting back on screen? You're kind of waiting and kind of anticipating when they're going to come back. I didn't necessarily get that with Laurie Metcalf with Lady Bird. And Laurie's performance is the more quiet one, the more restrained one. Obviously, it's a good performance and everything, but I don't necessarily think it's the one there. Plus, it's, sometimes they go for the more dramatic performances here at the Oscars. And then Allison Janney also has to put on makeup for part of the movie, so it's kind of, in a way, a little bit of a transformative performance, too. Putting on all the makeup and stuff, which definitely helped Eddie Redmayne in a tight category over Michael Keaton. There's a few other examples there too, but yeah, and I think the same thing, actually, if you look at it, back in 2015 when, what's his name won, Mark Rylance won for Bridge of Spies, he was another character that you love him when he's on screen, and when he's off screen, you're kind of like, oh, I wonder what he's up to, what's he doing back in prison, I want to go back to his character. I get that same feeling with Allison Janney, so, and I picked Allison Janney to win the Globe this Sunday, we'll see what happens, but, yeah, I think she's close. And also one more thing, it might be kind of a controversial statement, but I don't care. If you're Allison Janney, you're kind of secretly rooting for Margot Robbie to not get nominated for lead actress, and instead Judi Dench or Jessica Chastain gets in. If that happens, I, Tonya, I think it's a movie that's going to have support. I have it getting in for makeup. It's an oddball pick now for maybe original screenplay, and an oddball pick for film editing. Those are possibilities. It could have more support in the Academy than we think. It just got a PGA nomination. It surprised and got a WGA nomination over The Post and a couple other possible nominees there. So I think if Margot Robbie misses, there'll be a little bit of an outcry there. There'll be people saying, "Wow, why didn't you nominate her? Instead, you went with the safe choice of Judi Dench or Jessica Chastain." Which, arguably, I haven't seen Molly's Game yet, but definitely Judi Dench's performance, while it's terrific, it's more of the safe pick, and it's kind of more of that. But, and then I think you can see a real rally start, and it's like, well, if we want to give I, Tonya something, let's give it to Allison Janney. She's never been nominated for an Oscar. She's won all sorts of Emmys, and she's the queen of the Emmys, and won a whole bunch of Emmys, but she's also never won a Globe, and never, to my knowledge at least, won an individual Screen Actors Guild Award. I'll look into that a little bit more. I know I did the research on the Globe stuff, but I didn't necessarily go into the Screen Actors Guild stuff. But to my knowledge, she's never won an individual SAG award. She might have won for a cast, for West Wing, and a couple other things. But to my knowledge, she's never really won an individual SAG award. So I can see that also being a possibility for I, Tonya, if they want to give Lady Bird lead actress, or if they want to give Lady Bird outstanding cast. Then that's another way to either award the film or to award Laurie's performance, regardless there. Yeah, so that one, it's tight. Again, for right now, I'm kind of sticking with Laurie Metcalf, just, as the safe pick, but it's going to come down to those two. Okay, moving on now to Best Original Screenplay. I have 3 billboards out front for that one. Lady Bird in second place, Get Out in third place, Shape of Water in fourth, and The Post in fifth place. This also lines up with my Best Picture picks there. And again, like I've said, we've had a string now of Best Picture winners that have also won the Screenplay Prize. So I think that's why I have 3 billboards out front right now. And again, that's, I think, why Lady Bird's in second and Get Out's in third, because it's, most likely to least likely there. Now, sometimes we do get a thing now at the Oscars where, like we saw this last year, where you had your 3 biggest films last year were La La Land, Manchester by the Sea, and Moonlight. And we saw that each of the directors of those films got something. Best director went to Damien Chazelle, so he gets something. what's his name? Kenneth Lonergan got original screenplay for Manchester by the Sea, so he gets something, and Barry Jenkins was a co-writer on Moonlight, so when that one adapted screenplay, he got an Oscar for that. Now this year, when we look at it, Lady Bird, if it gets Best Picture, Greta Gerwig does not get an Oscar. She's not a producer on the film. If Get Out wins Best Picture, Jordan Peele gets an Oscar because he is a producer on the film. And Three Billboards, if that wins Best Picture, Martin McDonagh, who's also the writer and director, he gets an Oscar too because he's a producer on the film. So that's the thing, is if they say, okay, well, Three Billboards we're already going to give picture, so Martin McDonagh is going to get an Oscar there. That's a possibility. So that leaves both Lady Bird and Get Out as a possibility to win. The same thing happens if they say, okay, well, Get Out's going to be Best Picture, so let's give original screenplay to either Lady Bird or Three Billboards to give those writers possibilities. And yeah, so actually, if we look at it that way, and in that respect, to where each of those three get an Oscar. Let's say, let me see if I can get this right here. Okay, so Get Out wins Best Picture, and that means Jordan Peele gets an Oscar. Lady Bird, Greta Gerwig gets Best Director, so she gets an Oscar, and Martin McDonagh picks up an Oscar for Three Billboards in the screenplay category. I think that's actually the only way that can work. Can it, right? Because if Greta loses original screenplay and director, she can't get anything. If Jordan Peele loses screenplay and picture, and he's not nominated for director, he can't get anything. And Martin McDonagh, if he loses screenplay and picture, and he doesn't win director, he can't get anything. So, yeah. So there's a couple different, I think, possibilities in there you can kind of go through. But sometimes they really do want to spread the wealth in that way. Now, I doubt that's the way it plays out, and I think that's why I'm just picking Three Billboards for right now. But at the same time, we've got these five, which I think are all pretty solid bets. I mean, the Post even got in for the Globes, which the Globes don't always go for the Spielberg films in the screenplay category. Shape of Water, I think, is really safe. That got a Globe nomination, and it got in for WGA, I believe. Yeah, the Post missed WGA. That was pretty big. And Three Billboards was ineligible, but the rest of them were on here. The Big Sick got a WGA nomination. We mentioned I, Tonya got one. So those are a couple to pick from here. And then also Paul Thomas Anderson. He got in for Inherent Vice a couple of years ago. He got nominated for Magnolia. And so, yeah, he's been picked before for the Screenplay Prize. So for Phantom Thread, that's a possibility. So, yeah, there are, 3 or even 4 possible alternates here. So that's another thing, too, is original screenplay. I've been saying it all year. It's the most crowded category. So, you got films like Baby Driver this year, or Florida Project, kind of some of these outside picks. Wind River is another one, where it's like, it's maybe the only nomination the film's going to get, but it's like the category is so crowded that you can't make room for it. So, yeah. That's that one. Adapted screenplay. Here's the empty field here. This one's, because again, if you're like me and you're not putting the Netflix thing in, you're not putting Mudbound in, you're really, really kind of stuck with a few options here. So Call Me By Your Name, I think, will win. I think that one we can pretty much say is set in stone. James Ivory has never won an Oscar, despite being nominated several times. I think this will be his chance to win. Molly's Game I have in second place. Disaster Artist in third. Wonder in fourth place. I'm still keeping Last Flag Flying in for fifth place, but that's really because some of the other choices I don't see him going with. Okay, because again, I mentioned it, Mudbound, I don't think they're going to go for that because of the Netflix thing. The Beguiled is another adapted screenplay. That has not gotten any love since Cannes, I don't think. Very little love, at least. I don't see that being on their radar. All the Money in the World is an adapted screenplay, but it's a screenplay where, and most of the time when they're picking their screenplays, they're going with the dialogue. They're going with the heavy dialogue films. And, the screenplays that really pop off the screen and really pop off the page. That is not All the Money in the World. No, it's, like I said, it's kind of your standard thriller. And standard thrillers really don't get nominated for screenplay. And there's no real memorable dialogue in it, except for some of Christopher Plummer's stuff. But, yeah, that's like, one character. And then you've got Last Flag Flying, which is Richard Linklater. He did get nominated a few years ago. He's been nominated, actually, is it twice now? Well, other than Boyhood. I think he got another screenplay nomination before. Oh, yeah, the Before trilogy. Yeah, he's been nominated a couple times for those. So he's had a past with the Academy, and in particular with the writers branch. And this kind of reminds me a little bit of 20th Century Women from last year. Where it was like I was the only one picking it to get in, or not the only one, but I was one of the few people predicting it to get in, and it kept missing. It kept missing. So I wanted to pull it out, but I kept it in, and it paid off. So even though Last Flag Flying has performed absolutely terribly through the year, it's gotten maybe a couple nominations here and there. It's done very well, or has not done well at all. I just have a feeling. I just have a feeling with this one. So I'll keep it in until maybe if some other alternative gets in, like maybe All the Money in the World suddenly scores well, gets a DGA nomination, gets a few BAFTA nominations. Maybe then I'll put it in. But it's a possibility. But I think for whatever reason, I think Last Flag Flying has a higher chance. Then, like I said, we did see Logan get in for WGA, but I don't think that's going to happen. And then Victoria and Abdul is another one that's an adapted screenplay, but again, I don't think that one's going to get any love at all. So, yeah. All right. So, yeah, I think that's going to do it for me. So, yeah, we've got the Globes. That's actually tomorrow night for chronologically for the time of this video. And we've got, after that, yeah, I'll be back to the old place. So, like I said, this background you won't see for a while, maybe not until after the Oscars are over. And like I said, there is a possibility I might be doing some live reactions to the Globes. I'm still undecided as of right now, so we'll see. But that's one you can maybe look out for. Otherwise, if I don't do that, I'll have a video that I do right after the Globes that'll just be kind of a what happened, what did I miss, what did I get right, kind of one of those videos. And maybe where do we go from here? All right, so I wanted to give a quick update on my Oscar predictions for those top categories before the Globes happen, because after the Globes happen, we'll get our BAFTA nominations next week, Critics' Choices next week, DGA, I believe, comes out next week, so after that, we're going to see some significant changes and shakeups. So I wanted to get those opinions out before they become pretty possibly insignificant. All right, take care, everybody.